Welcome to Faith and Life Today, a place where your faith and life intersect with the issues impacting your world.
Faith and Life Today is a public affairs program from Life 107.1.
Now here's the host of Faith and Life Today, Jen Green.
Thanks so much for joining us today. I wish today's topic could be a little bit more uplifting, but actually it kind of is. I mean, it's a tough subject, but we have somebody here who essentially was sitting out having a conversation with God, and he was given the inspiration to pour into a problem that seems very prevalent in today's culture. I wish it weren't, but we hear stories almost every day of somebody taking their own life. Maybe your family has been affected by suicide, and maybe you wonder, what could I have done? What could be done differently? Is this my fault? Recently on the morning show, Taylor and I talked with a woman who said, how could I not have known? I was her best friend and I'm a nurse. But the fact is, many times we don't know. And the vehicles that people can use to get help when they feel suicidal can seem a little bit clunky, a little bit different, and maybe not so faith-friendly. And that's exactly why I brought Ben Segebart here today to talk to you on Faith and Life Today. Ben is a pastor at Indianola Community Church, and you basically were out worshiping in nature one day, and God kind of gave you this thought. Why don't you tell us about it, Ben? First of all, thanks very much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me on. And that's exactly how it happened. I'm on staff with a group from our church, and so we had stepped out to go pray. Once a month, we go together as a staff and pray, and we were just kind of led to pray for whatever you would like to pray for, and we all split up and kind of went to different areas where we could kind of be alone, be in nature. And I sat on a bench by a lake, and I sat there, and it was a beautiful day. The sun was shining. It was kind of like the birds are chirping, gentle breeze. And yet I was grieved because in the week ahead, I was going to be attending a funeral of a friend of mine who had taken his own life.
I'm sorry.
And it was difficult. And so I know that I'm not the only person who's experienced that kind of tragedy, and there's so many people who've been affected by similar situations. I started thinking about all the other people in our congregation that had experienced that. And I just started thinking of and praying for those families, and that's really when this idea just kind of felt as if it had come out of nowhere, but we know I believe I know where it came from.
Absolutely.
And that's where I got this 10-friend idea.
Well, tell us what 10-friend is.
So 10-friend simply is an idea that came to me to help people have an action step and a code word when it comes to suicide and suicide prevention. And so what happened is I was sitting by that lake, this phrase just came to my mind: count to 10 and tell a friend. And so I kind of thought, there isn't much to say. I thought, this is kind of silly, to be frank. And I took out my cell phone and I typed it into my cell phone. It was something I thought, I'll just think about this later. And I did think about it later. I started researching some of the other suicide prevention slogans that were out there, and I felt like all of them were really good. They were very thoughtful. They were positive. They were encouraging. But those were trying to tell a person who is struggling so terribly how to feel. And this idea of count to 10 and tell a friend isn't telling a person how to feel, it's telling them what to do. And that's where I felt like this idea was a little bit different. And so when you shorten that to a hashtag, 10friend, it then gives the individual who's struggling something very clear that they can communicate with a friend that's not demoralizing to them. It's they don't have to wrestle through all of their thoughts of, okay, what do I really need to verbalize to my friend as they're reaching out for help? They don't have to put all those thoughts together and think through what they need to say. They can just simply send a text or a message that says 10friend.
For so many people, even talking on the phone to a stranger causes anxiety. Anymore in our culture, we just don't even speak on the phone. And so a lot of these hotlines are where you have to talk to a stranger.
Yeah.
And I would think that a lot of people would be really intimidated by that. This kind of takes that intimidation away because you're speaking with somebody that you trust.
Absolutely. And I was thinking about with the, such helpful tools that our culture has already, like the suicide prevention hotline is an excellent tool. But it's really causing someone to do something they've never done before, which is reach out to this number that maybe they've never reached out to before, in a time when they're in their most desperate, state. And I think reaching out to a friend, and even if they had the forethought to be able to tell that friend, hey, if I send you this message, it just means that I'm struggling really bad. Sometimes people will send a message to a friend that's as short as, hey, what's up? And the friend receives that message and they're watching a movie or they're out with other friends and they think, well, I'll get back with them later. And that what's up was actually a huge cry for help. They were struggling, but the other individual didn't know. As much as they care for them, it just wasn't enough to know what was really going on. Something like 10 Friend helps them understand what they're really struggling with and how bad it's gotten.
You mentioned a code word. Where does that come in?
So the code word is if they were to hashtag or just send 10 Friend to their friend.
I see.
So that's the code word. Again, some people, as they're struggling, they don't even think. I've even talked with people and they say, well, when I'm going through such a hard time, what am I going to say?
Right.
And some of it has gotten so bad they have a plan. Maybe they're in the middle of about to carry that plan out, and to text that to a friend or even to call someone and to verbalize that's so difficult. We shouldn't make them have to verbalize it. Let's just give them a code word, 10 Friend, 10 friend. And when you receive
the number
that,
10.
Yep, the number 10. Thank you. When they receive that, they know, okay, at first they might think, well, that's a weird message. And this is one of the reasons why being on the radio is such a helpful thing, because if someone receives a 10 Friend message, they may not know what that means. If you were to Google hashtag 10 Friend, you'll see right away, I think it's right now the second search on Google that would come up. That would be the website, 10friend.org, and they'd be able to read more about I received this message, what is it?
Let's put ourselves in the shoes of the friend that gets the text or gets that phone call.
Yeah.
You're a pastor, and I know that you wouldn't say that the friend would take the place of a professional. What would you say their responsibility or their duty is at that point with the person who has just texted them that?
Right. At that point, you've been brought into a really delicate situation, honestly. The great news is they chose to reach out to you because they have a relationship with you. They counted to 10. They told a friend. And so there's something about you that they trust. There's something about you that they wanted to hear from you. And so that's the first thing that I encourage people with is if you start to freak out, you don't need to freak out. Be a friend in that moment. You can ask the person, hey, where are you at? Can I call you? Because oftentimes it'll come maybe in the form of a text.
Yeah.
Can I call? Where are you? Can I come over? And you just do what a friend would do. Now, if you find out that through conversation or dialogue or texting that the situation's got really dire, you could call 911. 911 is always the quickest way for help. You could start to, there's so many resources online. This 10 Friend idea isn't to take the place of all the amazing work that's been done. So you can start to research, well, what would happen if I receive this call? But I just want to stress the number one thing to do is to be their friend in that moment. And I think the instincts of a friend can be very helpful to just to reach out in the tender care that you have for
I would
your loved
agree.
one.
I would agree. Recently, I was on the phone with somebody and I got a text that was extremely disturbing. And I remember telling the person that I was on the phone with, I just got this text and I don't know what to do. And this person was like, okay, I'm not sure what to do either. Let's pray.
Yeah.
And that's not something that I do an awful lot, pray over the phone with a friend that, he's really not that close, but we're both believers.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't know what to do either. Let's pray.
Yeah.
And I think that might be something that if you get that hashtag or you get that phone call, that 10 Friend phone call, maybe the first thing you need to do, either at least between you and God or between you and that person, say a prayer.
Absolutely.
That prayer was so powerful for me. It changed my whole response to that text and that difficult situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reality is that God is our 10 Friend. Jesus Christ is our number one friend in this life. He is the one that we can reach out to at any time. He'll always respond. He's the closest friend that we'll ever have. And it's just kind of fun to think about the reality that we can invite the greatest friend right into any and every situation that we have in this life.
And I know that sometimes when we are at our lowest and it's so dark and you feel empty inside and you don't think that anybody loves you. You don't feel Jesus. But sometimes that friend that you reach out to, they can be Jesus for you in that moment.
Yeah.
I love this idea. I think let me ask you this, Ben. Do you think it's important for two people to have maybe a conversation ahead of time that says, if I ever get into this type of situation, you might be my 10 friend, and maybe let's plan this out a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the beauties of this. I was talking with someone who, this is a relatively new idea that just kind of started floating around. And I was talking with someone who'd seen a post about it on Facebook, and later on that very day, they had sat down with someone that they hadn't seen for a long time. And they sat down for coffee. And as one of them was just kind of talking about their life and real casual, and then finally took a breath and said, "So how have you been? We haven't caught up for so long." And the other friend proceeded to just say how difficult life had been and really kind of unloading some really difficult things. Well, the individual who had seen the 10 friend message said, "Hey, thank you, first of all, for sharing that. I'm sorry I took up so much time talking about my life. You're really going through a lot." And said, I just read this thing, and when you're in those difficult times, it's called 10 friend. It's count to 10 and tell a friend, "I'd like to be your 10 friend, and all you'd have to do is just send me a message that says 10 friend, and I'll know exactly how hard it's gotten, and I'd love to be there for you." And it was just that quick.
That's
in the middle of a conversation.
It just gave me goosebumps. That is really cool. This is such a great idea. And I'm sure as a pastor, you've seen this affect people in your community, affect people in your congregation. How do people seem to be responding to this idea of 10 friend?
They've been responding very positively. Most people start by saying it's so sad that this is such a difficult thing in our culture that like so many people have had to deal with because it's become so prevalent, people taking their own lives. So,
and we do feel more and more isolated all the time.
Absolutely. Where this takes people out of isolation.
Yeah.
And that's what we're not telling people how to feel. We're telling them what to do. And what we're telling them to do is leading them from isolation and those thoughts that become secular, out of isolation, back into community and friendship. And we're asking them to do that with the people they trust and love the most. So it's been received really well.
If people want to find out more about hashtag 10friend, where should they go? If they want to reach out to somebody to maybe email them or text them more about it, what information can you give them? Yeah.
So there is a website that's been set up. Just it's 10friend.org. That's 10friend.org. And they can read a little bit more about it there. They can send that link to any of their friends if they are having a hard time kind of verbalizing what it is and what it's all about.
You are encouraging people to share this on social media as much as possible.
Absolutely. And that was going to be my next point, is to really, how can they get involved in this? Well, they can have conversations with their friends about their friend being a 10 friend for them. And they can also just make a post on their own social media account to bring an awareness to it. If there was a cultural awareness of what 10 friend meant, then I think more and more people would be able to use it, and just the versatility of how this just simple tool can be used in our culture today.
Any platform.
Yeah, absolutely.
All platforms.
Yeah.
The platforms that I don't understand, like Snapchat.
Yep, go for it. Let it rip. That's the beauty of a hashtag.
Okay. All right, Ben, one more time, the name of the website and any information that you want people to know if you were in an elevator telling somebody about it.
Yeah, I would encourage anyone to visit www.10friend.org, and they can read more about it there and share it with someone that you love.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for listening to Faith and Life Today, a place where your faith and life intersect.
Faith and Life Today is a public affairs program from Life 107.1.